In 2012, a beachcomber in Canada came across an old Harley Davidson that washed ashore. Turns out the bike was lost in the 2011 Japanese tsunami and managed to float all the way across the Pacific. Author Lois Duncan wrote many popular crime and suspense novels throughout the 70s and 80s, but she essentially stopped writing completely when her own daughter became the victim of an unsolved murder in 1989. In 2020, a fan drove 3 hours to deliver a much-needed dose of insulin to rapper Boozy Badass. She refused to accept any payment other than a photo with him. But on her way home, she stopped at a gas station, bought a scratch-off ticket, and won 10 grand. In 2004, grandmother Dorothy Fletcher suddenly suffered a heart attack on her flight to Florida. When the stewardess asked if there was a doctor on board, 15 people stood up. They were on their way to a cardiology conference. In 2010, an amateur treasure hunter from England let his 3-year-old son borrow his metal detector for the first time. Within minutes, he discovered a 500-year-old gold pendant worth $4 million. A dog gave birth to 3 puppies, each with their own corresponding number on their back. There was only one photo ever taken of Abraham Lincoln giving a speech, and his killer John Wilkes Booth is in it. On December 31st, little Delaney turned 1 year old while her great-great-grandmother turned 101. They were born exactly a century apart. These 2 bullets collided during the Battle of Gallipoli in 1916. For 300 years, the lonely tree of Tenere was the only tree within a 100-mile radius in the Sahara Desert. That was until it was accidentally knocked down in 1973 by a drunk driver. In 1974, a photographer was snapping photos of 2 amateur street mimes in Central Park. 35 years later, he discovered that one of them was actor Robin Williams before he became famous. A Reddit user from California was gaming in his room when a stray bullet went through his window and struck him in the head. But he was miraculously saved by his Razer headset, which prevented the bullet from piercing his skull. Diana Ross, who sang "Ain't No Mountain High Enough," lost her husband in a mountain climbing accident. In 1983, a man confessed to the murder of his wife after a female skull was found in a peat bog near his home. He was convicted of her 1961 murder solely based on this confession. But it turned out that the skull actually belonged to a woman who had died nearly 1,800 years earlier. After this discovery, the man withdrew his confession but was convicted anyway. David Hull was digging for gold in 2015 when he came across a rock that he was certain had gold inside. But after years of failing to crack the rock open, he decided to get it checked out by an expert, and it ended up being something much more rare than gold. Turns out it was an iron meteorite estimated to be 4.6 billion years old. This woman adopted an elderly dog because it looked exactly like the dog she had as a child that her parents told her ran away. A microchip scan then confirmed that it was in fact her old dog. Someone felt safe leaving their sunroof open inside until a pipe busted open above their car. In 1999, Richard Anthony Jones was convicted of a felony even though he had a strong alibi. He spent 17 years in prison until authorities found his doppelganger living in the same town with the same first name. In 1992, a man from Great Britain was using a metal detector to find a lost hammer on his farm. But instead, he stumbled upon one of the largest collections of Roman coins in the world, worth over $5 million today. In 2013, Hanukkah began on the same day as Thanksgiving on November 28th. This convergence, known as Thanksgivika, won't happen again until the year 79,811. In 2007, a bowhead whale was discovered with the end of a harpoon in its neck. It was found that the harpoon tip dated back to the year 1890, proving that the bowhead whale is the world's oldest known living mammal. In 1985, the U.S. Navy said it was searching for the Titanic as a cover story for their mission to find 2 missing nuclear submarines. But they had a little extra time once they located them, so they decided to look for the Titanic, and they actually found it. An Indonesian man became an instant millionaire when a meteorite worth $2 million crashed into his home. The rock is an extremely rare variety that is estimated to be around 4.5 billion years old. Vinny the chestnut horse was born with a perfect white shadow of his own body. A married couple was photographed at the exact same time and place in Disney World 15 years before they even met. They weren't even living in the same country when the photo was taken. A dog from Indiana shot his owner in the foot with a shotgun. The name of the dog was Trigger. In 1784, a Japanese seaman sent a message in a bottle saying that his ship had wrecked. 150 years later, it washed up in the village where he was born. Frayne Selak narrowly survived a fatal train crash, plane crash, 2 car explosions, and being hit by a bus. He then went on to win $1 million in the lottery. In 1954, Ann Hodges was hit with a softball-sized meteorite while taking a nap in her Alabama home. She remains the only known human to ever be hit by a meteorite. Troy Leon Gregg was sentenced to death for killing 3 men in Georgia in 1976. On the night before his execution, he managed to escape, only to be killed in a bar fight that same night. On July 4, 1826, President John Adams' last words before passing were "Thomas Jefferson survives." Little did he know, President Jefferson had died just a few hours earlier that same day. Vera Cermak from Prague contemplated both murder and suicide after learning that her husband had been cheating on her. She chose suicide and jumped from her 3rd-story balcony only to land on her husband, who was walking on the street below. Cushioned by his body, she survived, but he was killed instantly. In an episode of Johnny Bravo, there's a poster of a building on fire with the words "Coming Soon." This episode aired in April of 2001, just 5 months before 9/11. Narnia the Two-Faced Cat recently gave birth to 2 kittens of each color. In 1981, a South African astronomer gave a lecture on how death could happen at any time. At the end of the lecture, he popped the peppermint candy into his mouth and promptly choked to death. A man from Washington State found a caterpillar that looks like it has the face of Edgar Allan Poe on its back. These 2 nurses were hired within months of each other to work the same shift at the same Florida hospital. They soon discovered that they were long-lost sisters from Korea who had been separated for nearly 40 years. A man from New Jersey bought a $5 bottle of orange juice from ShopRite, which his wife made him return because it was too expensive. He then decided to buy 2 Powerball tickets with the refunded money and ended up winning the $300 million jackpot. This person caught the same exact fish a month and a half later. Harry John Patch was the last surviving soldier from World War I and was briefly the oldest man in Europe. He died at the age of 111 years, 1 month, 1 week, and 1 day. Tom Cruise divorced all 3 of his ex-wives when they turned 33, and each is 11 years younger than the last. The first person to die during the construction of the Hoover Dam was J.G. Tierney on December 20th, 1922. On the same exact day, 14 years later, the last person died. It was J.G. Tierney's son, Patrick. A Chinese couple recently discovered that they were in the same photograph as teenagers, more than a decade before they even met. On the left is the facial reconstruction of a 9,000-year-old skeleton that was found in a cave in Cheddar, England. His DNA was tested, and researchers found that a living relative was teaching history only a half-mile away from the site, linking back 300 generations. These identical strangers happened to sit next to each other on a flight. When Don Carcos fought in World War II, he was hit with shrapnel and blinded in his right eye. While working in a barn 64 years later, a horse headbutted him in the exact same spot. The man was thrown into the wall with force, but his vision was suddenly restored. In late 1864, the brother of John Wilkes Booth was boarding a train when he noticed a man was about to be crushed by the car. So he quickly grabbed the man by the collar and pulled him to safety. The man he'd saved was Robert Lincoln, the son of the president who would be assassinated by John Wilkes Booth just months later. In 1903, a pair of nearly identical strangers named Will West and William West ended up in the same Kansas prison. This case was a big part of the reason why fingerprints are now used for identification. In 2019, a young man named Tyler Moon was running in a Minneapolis marathon when he suddenly collapsed. Thankfully, he was wearing a Jesus Saves running bib since the man behind him was a nurse who performed CPR and saved his life. The nurse's first name was Jesus. An astrologer warned John Lennon that he would be shot on an island. John was so disturbed by this that it caused him to cancel an upcoming yacht trip around the Greek islands. 11 years later, John Lennon was shot and killed on the island of Manhattan. These natural ice formations in Antarctica look like structures built by the ancient Romans. This 3,000-year-old clay pig was found 2 years ago at the Lian ruins of China. Internet users immediately pointed out that it looked oddly similar to the pigs from Angry Birds. An LA couple was ecstatic to see the first ultrasound of their baby until they realized that he looked exactly like Donald Trump. The shadow of this sign in Devon, England closely resembles a person being hanged. Coincidentally, it's located near a spot called Dead Man's Cross, where criminals were hanged from a gallows in the 13th century. Hall of Fame boxer Sugar Ray Robinson once had a dream where he killed his next opponent in the ring. Afraid that his dream was telling him something, he initially backed out of his next fight until a priest convinced him otherwise. He ended up scoring a decisive knockout in the 8th round that resulted in the death of his opponent, Jimmy Doyle. A Russian woman once caught her fiancé cheating on her when she saw him with another woman on Google Street View. In 2015, a man found a Mountain Dew bottle from 1992 that would have won him a brand new Super Nintendo. Jim Springer and Jim Lewis are identical twins who were separated at birth but ended up living nearly identical lives. Both married a woman named Linda, got divorced, and remarried a woman named Betty. They also both had a dog named Toy, drove a Chevy, and smoked Salem cigarettes. All of this was discovered when they were reunited at the age of 39. In 1984, NYPD officer Robert Cunningham decided to tip his waitress with a lottery ticket instead of cash. He told her they could split the winnings if she helped him pick the numbers. Sure enough, Cunningham won the state jackpot of $6 million, and true to his word, gave the waitress half. In 1902, the Mount Pele eruption killed all 30,000 people in a village except for a criminal who was on death row. He was locked up deep underground in solitary confinement, which served as the perfect shelter from the blast. On New Year's Eve in 2011, a terrorist planned on blowing up Moscow's Red Square with a mobile phone bomb. But her plan failed miserably when she received a spam text wishing her a Happy New Year. This caused the bomb to detonate while she was still at the safe house, and she was the only person who died. British man Stephen Whiteley turned a $3 bet into $2 million after picking all 6 horse race winners to win the jackpot. The final winning horse had never won in his previous 28 races. For the first half of his life, Hungarian man Adam Rayner was barely 4 feet tall as a result of dwarfism. But during his 20s, a pituitary tumor caused a dramatic growth spurt, and by age 33, he was 7'2". He's the only person in recorded history to have been both a dwarf and a giant. Last Tuesday, baby Simon Thomas was born at 2:22 on 2/22/22 in hospital room number 2. In 1935, an Australian fisherman reeled in a tiger shark and put it on display in the Sydney Aquarium until it vomited a human arm. A shark expert concluded that the arm had not been bitten off but was cleanly removed with a blade. This resulted in a murder investigation and the eventual arrest of the killers. A woman named Claire bought a card table for $25 at a yard sale because she thought it looked nice. 30 years later, she found out that it was one of only 6 tables in the world made by furniture makers John Seymour and Son. So she brought it to an auction and made $540,000. World War I ended at 11 o'clock on the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918. A woman named Elvita Adams once tried to commit suicide by jumping off the Empire State Building. She jumped from the 86th floor but was immediately blown back to the 85th floor by a sudden strong gust of wind. This turtle's shell naturally has the word God written on it. April 15th has been a notoriously tragic day in our world's history. Lincoln's assassination, the sinking of the Titanic, the Hillsborough disaster, the Boston bombing, and the Notre Dame Cathedral fire all occurred on April 15th. 2016, brothers Bob and James Stockless both won the lottery on the same day with randomized numbers. But one was way happier than the other since Bob won $7 while his brother James took home over $290 million. In 1950, a Nebraska church exploded 5 minutes after choir practice was supposed to start. But miraculously, all 15 members of the choir were late that day for different reasons, and not a single person was hurt. When actor-comedian Red Fox was dying of a heart attack while on set, nobody offered to help him. This was because everyone thought it was nothing more than the fake heart attack act he was famous for. A Chinese woman attending her son's wedding was quickly sent to tears when she noticed a birthmark on the bride's hand. Turns out the bride was her long-lost daughter, whom she'd been trying to find for over 20 years.